Now let's take a look at return methods. We were just looking at methods that didn't return anything, they were void. So now we're going to look at the way you set up a method where you can actually send something back once you've done whatever it is you want to do. So in this example, we have public class fun. Inside of fun, we have public int times int num1, int num2, open braces, return num1 times num2. So we got a whole lot more things going on than we had in the prior example. So now we're going to break down the times method and make sure that you understand what the different pieces are and what they're doing. So before we had a diagram of a method when we were dealing with the void method. So here you have access. The one on the prior example we had access where it was public. This one's public. This one, the return type is int. The return type in the prior example was void. In the prior example, the name was either say name or speak. In this example, the name is times. In the prior two say name and speak methods, which you can go back and look at, which you should, which we'll look at also here in a second, we did not have int num1 comma int num2. Think about num1 and num2 as variables. That's pretty much what a parameter is. We're going to send in some stuff. Those two pieces, those two parameters or variables, however you like to look at it, will be housing the values that we pass in so that we can do some manipulation of those values. Inside the orange chunk that we have here, that's where we put our code. That's where our code segments go to actually perform whatever task it is, whatever thing we're making happen with that particular method. So here's the method that we had in the prior slides whenever we're dealing with void methods. On this one we have speak. Speak has a print line in it. Nowhere in there do you see the word return. The return type isn't int, string, double, whatever. It only says void because, or it says void simply because it doesn't send anything back. Here we have the times method. It's been broken down now, taken out of the class, so you can see it a little bit easier. And so we have times. Times returns an int, and it has two parameters, num1 and num2. So whatever's sent in for num1 and num2, it multiplies those values and sends the returns the result back. So whenever we're setting up the method, we define the return type as int, and then we've also defined some parameters. So inside the parentheses, we've set up two parameters, num1 and num2, so that we can pass in those values that we need. Whenever you're setting up your parameters, you have to give them names and you have to specify what type they are. In this case, they're both integers. So here's the code in action, right? We've got class fun, we've got our times method in there, return stuff, send some stuff back. Down at the bottom, we've instantiated a fun object. A plus is referring to that fun object, and then we tell A plus, hey, we want to use the times method, send in 4 and 5. What do you get back? You get back 20. So 4 goes into num1, 5 goes into num2. We multiply 4 times 5, we get back 20. In this example, we're doing the same thing, except rather than printing out the result of the return, we're storing it in a variable. So at this point, there would be no output. We'd have to say system out println store it in order for us to see the result of making those calls. So whenever you're defining parameters, the parameters that you put inside the method declaration, inside the parentheses next to the method name where you specify the types and the names, those are called formal parameters. That is where you're actually defining what each one is and giving it a name, and you're declaring those parameters. And actual parameters, the thing that you're passing in. So in this example, num1 and num2 are the formal parameters, and then 3 and 5 are the actual parameters. So actual means the actual thing that you're sending in, or however you like to look at it. But you can have it as a primitive, literal value, or you can pass in a variable or whatever it is that you want to do. So let's go out and let's take a look at these return methods so we can make sure we understand the difference between a void or a non-return method and an actual return method. Let's take a look at fun and fun runner. In fun runner, we have an instantiation of the fun class with a plus pointing at it. I'm calling the times method twice and printing out the result of 3 times 4 and 11 times 5. And then I made a variable called store it, which is where I call the times method, take the value that it sends back, store it in that variable, and then I print out the result. So if we run this, it's going to do what we would expect. It's going to print out 12, which is 3 times 4. It's going to print out 55, which is 11 times 5, and it's going to print out 28, which is 2 times 14. So now let's go over and let's take a look at the actual code. Notice it has public, which is its access, int's the return type, times is the name, and num1 and num2 are the parameters, and then inside we have the return of num1 times num2. So whatever we send in for num1 and num2, whatever those actual parameter values are, it's going to multiply those together and give us a result. So What could we do in here to mess around with this? Well, let's go back over here. Let's go to Fun Runner. Say in Fun Runner, we didn't send in 2 values. We just send in 1. This is the kind of stuff that you might invariably do. Okay, it's going to give me an issue. It's going to say, hey, you're missing a value. So I got to go back up here and I got to put 2 parameters. So whenever I'm trying to call the fun method, or trying to call times, the times method in the fun class, if it has 2 parameters defined, 2 actual parameters, or sorry, 2 formal parameters, then I have to actually send in 2 actual parameters to match up with the formal parameters. If I don't do that, it's going to throw an error message. The other thing that's going to happen is if I come over here and I forget to return something, say I do some kind of stuff, I don't return, and I go back over here and I try to run that, it's going to pop up and say, hey, you got a problem, I'll go ahead and proceed, and it's telling me that it's missing a return. So that's something that's common that you're going to have. You're either going to try to call the method over here with no parameters or fewer than 2, which is pretty common, and then you're potentially going to go over here and create your code and forget to return. Those are 2 common issues that you run into whenever you're working with parameterized methods and then return methods. So notice here it's going to throw a fit. I got to go back in, I got to put the 2 actual parameters back, and then I can run it again and we're good to go. So nothing real complicated about this. It's a little different than the void method because you have to have a return type. This one has parameters. If I just wanted to make a return method, I wouldn't necessarily have to have parameters, but most of the time it makes more sense to do that. And over here in the runner, we have the calls, and we have 2 calls where we're just calling the method, and the 3rd call where we're actually storing the result and printing out the result. But make sure, come in here and make some changes, try to make it blow up, try to put in some things that you think might work, might not work, so that you can better understand how all this is taking place and what's going on.